Welcome to the Celtic Star Podcast, a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes and I'm joined by my cohort Kevin Graham.
Hello, Paul.
And today we've got another fantastic guest. This week's guest is an award-winning documentary maker and acclaimed novelist with a Celtic State of Mind. Welcome to the show, Margot McCuaig.
Hi, thanks for inviting me on.
It's an absolute pleasure, Margot. What we'd like to talk to you about, first and foremost, is your love for Celtic. How were you introduced to that thing called Celtic?
I think, like many people who are part of the Celtic family, I don't think there's ever a formal introduction. I think you just are. You are born into the Celtic community. I don't ever remember a time when Celtic wasn't my passion. I come from a Celtic supporting family, mum and dad, 5 kids. We went to all the games. It's just part and parcel of my life. I think the first game I went to, I was around 4 years old. So it's just always been there. So it's never been, you know, a sudden light bulb moment where you say, wow, Celtic, they're quite good. You know, I think I'm going to support them. You just support them. And I think I've been very, very fortunate in coming into a family and a club that is so remarkable and has so many fairy tale moments, which I've enjoyed throughout my life.
Is 4 too young to take your kid to the football? Is that a good age?
Absolutely not. It's a perfect age. I mean, I can remember feeling very small and my mum and dad feeling very tall and feeling that it was very loud, but I can also remember very distinctly seeing Dixie Deans. For some reason, he's the man that stood out for me. Not my favourite player by any manner of means, but this figure, this remarkable guy who did all these incredible movements, and that's just stayed with me.
You say that he wasn't your hero. Who were your heroes in those early days then?
Well, my absolute hero has never changed. It's Danny McGrane. He is my number one Celtic player, always will be. I don't care who comes from here on in. He is the man. I just thought he was formidable. He had such beautiful control on the ball. He was safe. He was constant. You know, he had flair as well. We all remember him running down that wing in 1986 against St Mirren when we won the league. You know, he just was a player that you felt confident that if he was going to get the ball, that you were going to be okay.
We loved the centenary season, and I think that was one of the biggest things about the centenary season. Danny McGrane wasn't there, and from me watching Celtic in the 80s, you always just thought Danny McGrane was always going to be there, and it was one of the strangest things.
Remember the Tommy Burns testimonial when he came on the pitch? Because he hadn't been given a kind of farewell, and I think him and Tam had arranged that, and he came onto the pitch just to say bye-bye. I mean, that's your early Celtic life, and obviously you've watched excellent Celtic teams. When did this passion for filmmaking enter your life?
To be honest, Paul, I think I kind of fell into it. I mean, I always enjoyed stories and, you know, read constantly when I was a kid. I'm one of those typical little bookworms that ends up becoming a writer. So storytelling was always something that I was fascinated with, and, you know, being able to tell stories from a football point of view was kind of always there, bubbling away. But in terms of actually setting out a career to become a filmmaker, that wasn't really on my agenda. You know, I'm a working class girl from Glasgow. You don't think that these kind of things are on your radar. Certainly not what I was thinking. You know, I left school early. I didn't go to university until I was a mature student. But in the sense of the media stuff, I kind of fell into it while working at Celtic. I initially joined the club on a full-time basis to set up the museum there. My first degree was in history and politics. And I'm hugely fascinated with the history of football and how that affects us, you know, in popular culture and socially and economically. I mean, I think it's a fantastic indicator to try and understand better Scottish culture and Scottish life. But from working in the museum part of Celtic to becoming involved in the very early beginnings of a media department, you know, back in those days, like, we didn't know what an ISDN line was, but, you know, all of a sudden we were streaming live matches, we were then doing video content, you know, building up to doing programming for the big screens, and then eventually, you know, working hard to do longer term stories. I mean, the very early days, myself and Tony Hamilton, Des O'Hara, we made a series of films called Hail Hail, you know, based on the where we were. So we did a Hail Hail USA because we were away on tour with the club in America. You know, we did a Hail Hail Neil Lennon. So it was doing these little half-hour programmes that really gave me a taste for storytelling, and then, you know, it just kind of took off from there when I eventually moved to Celtic TV as part of Setanta, and as well as producing the daily magazine show, I had the opportunity there to make longer form programmes, so I did quite a lot of documentaries there, and then just knew really that that's what I wanted to do.
Now, when did you join Celtic? That must have been a real thrill to be walking into your work every day and your work at Celtic Park.
Well, initially I joined in 1994 while I was at uni, and I joined part-time to work in the ticket office. Well, it was full-time during the summer period and then, part-time throughout the rest of the season. And that was just like a dream come true, I mean, as I said, Celtic was this place, this special, with this paradise. You got to go to the games, but then you left at the end of the afternoon. It wasn't somewhere that you actually went inside the doors. You didn't touch the hallowed turf. And all of a sudden, I was working there and getting to meet these incredible people, people that you had admired your whole life, and all of a sudden you were mixing with them. So it really was a dream come true. And then I actually approached the club after I finished uni with a proposal to set up a museum. Having done quite a lot of work, I just didn't phone up and say, here, do you fancy doing a museum? I went and visited a lot of other museums like in Ajax and Liverpool and Manchester United, worked really hard in creating a business plan and a budget proposal, and fortunately they said yes. So then going from, somebody who worked part-time in the ticket office to somebody who was managing a department, and, my office was in the boardroom. How cool is that?
That's incredible. I mean, talking about Celtic museums, memorabilia and curio is something I'm passionate about. I'm actually working on a book where we are looking to obtain an example of every match-worn jersey.
Okay.
Now, we've only managed to get back to 1950, but what we have found is it's private collectors that have got the collections, and the club has very little jerseys. When you moved in there, what kind of memorabilia does the club have that isn't on display? Where's that kept?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. There's only a limited space, and thankfully they're talking about setting up a new museum now. So I think some of that stuff that's not getting the time of day will have its rightful place. But when I first joined the museum, there wasn't any sense of having a proper collection. There was no inventory. There was no sort of, this is here, that's there. So that was one of my main jobs when I first started, was just getting a sense of what the club had, and then digging out a cupboard, finding stuff like in the back of the stand. It was really quite exciting. And also when I was doing I wasn't physically doing the construction work, but I had builders in knocking down walls to create one of the museum spaces, and in that process we managed to find the original Celtic glass that was above the front door, which was actually, it had been built on top of. So it was such, I was like in tears when I saw this, because for me it was just the most incredible thing to see something that, so you knew that, Jock, Stein, all these amazing Celtic figures had walked through that gate. And
they had built a wall over that. They had
built, because it's where it was almost as if they had just taken it down from where the spot of the old front door was, and then just, we'll shove it in there, and then the wall had been built over it. Nobody knew anything about it, and so it's still on display now, just when you go through the dressing room.
There's a row of glass missing, and they took away the row of glass because they had to put a shutter. So there was a metal shutter had to go down.
Really?
So there's a row of glass missing.
Someone has that somewhere.
So you heard it here first. You are responsible for finding that, and it's still on display, and it's such an iconic image with the stained glass.
We also think we know who's got the door number.
The 9 and 5.
Aye.
Oh, intriguing.
So you've then moved into the media side of things, and it's very early days. I mean, did you get a sense at that time, Margot, just how big social media was going to start to play a part in football? You look at it now in terms of fan engagement and directing traffic onto the main site for ticket sales and merchandise. Did you get a sense this is quite exciting and this is going to explode? Yeah,
absolutely. I think going back to those early days, we were really, really aware of what the potential could be. And that wasn't easy because perhaps the technology wasn't as good then as we needed it to be. We were streaming live stuff twice a day, or we were uploading stuff, and it was taking, at the beginning we were using a phone line, to upload like video content. So you're talking about like sitting for a day watching stuff and then for it to fall over at the last minute. But we knew that for the Celtic family to be able to sort of truly engage with Celtic, no matter where in the world, that it had to be based around some kind of immediate access that would allow people to have 24-hour participation with the club. And we worked really, really hard to do that. And I think in those early days, how the audience were so appreciative of being able to have that. Like the people in America, this traditional Celtic family that okay, they had the pleasure of some of the Celtic players going out to their conventions every year, but having that one-to-one access every day, I think, was particularly remarkable. And I'm really proud of what we did back then. Okay, some of it was a bit ropey, and none of us were trained. We all just worked on the job. We picked it up as we went along. But I think what we did was really special.
I mean, before Margot and that got involved, all you really had was club call. Do you remember the club call?
Yeah.
45 pence a minute to tell you Stuart Slater was injured.
Did you phone that?
Aye.
Now, you moved into documentaries while you were working in the media team at Celtic. Can you tell us some of the ex-players that you enjoyed interviewing and, putting these films together? Because there's one I've spoken to you before. I was a massive fan of the George Conley one. Yeah, I mean, George Conley, that was remarkable. And he, as you know, he doesn't like doing media stuff, and he had, he'd refused to do any interviews for decades. And at the time of his launch of his book, Lost Boy, he finally agreed that we could go along and speak to him, and he said, right, okay, I'll do something, but it's only going to be 2 or 3 minutes. And then the next thing, he was speaking for an hour. Doing keepy-uppies in the back garden. Yeah, he was fantastic. I mean, what a story. And I think his story is so relevant now, when there's so much talk about mental health in footballers and how people felt that they weren't able to speak out and speak up. And I know George had, a few people that he could engage with, and that people were very protective of him. But in those days, you just did not have the opportunity to be able to say how you were feeling. And it was a travesty that he just backed away from football altogether just because, for various reasons about his health, he couldn't cope with it.
In these days of changing ways, so-called liberated days, a story comes to mind of a friend of mine. Georgie boy was gay, I guess, nothing more or nothing less, the kindest guy I ever knew. His mother's tears fell in vain. The afternoon George tried to explain that he needed love like all the rest.
But yeah, so meeting him and getting to spend time with him was amazing. But I did this Once a Boy series as well, where I spent time with Peter Grant and with Roy Aitken. Peter Grant was amazing because it's an hour's programme, and I think I only got to ask him 4 questions because he would just say everything, and that's an incredible period of time when you think, the games and the events and everything that Peter Grant was involved in, you could just sit back and just relish every minute of it.
Now, you're also involved in the writing of a Jimmy Johnstone documentary back then for Celtic.
Yeah. That was that was a brilliant experience as well. A very emotional time because it wasn't long after, obviously, Jimmy had passed away, and that because I knew Jimmy and had spent a fair bit of time with him and interviewing him in all different sort of scenarios, and so that was quite challenging so soon after his death to be involved in that. But I think what we made was something that was really honourable for him, and the fans really appreciated it.
Now, you're working at what sounds like a dream job at that moment in time in your life. What made you decide to strike out and go on your own and work in different areas?
Well, at the time, Celtic TV was under the Setanta banner, and I had been there for 4 years. I had done a lot. I was doing the daily programme every day. I was making these documentaries, but something inside me just wanted more. I wanted to have more control over the narrative. I wanted to have, more influence in what I was doing, and I just wanted to. I felt I'd come as far as I could go in that particular environment with Setanta. So I took on another job, which was fantastic. The BBC Alaba channel was just launching, the company that had won the contract to produce the sport. It was something starting from the very, very beginning. It was a huge challenge. I'm not a native Gaelic speaker. So it was a new world, a new environment, but an opportunity that I knew would allow me to, to develop and do different things. I think it's the best thing I ever did. I think it gave me fantastic managerial skills. It gave me, it opened up another world for me, so that when it came to developing and creating my own company, Purple TV, that I had all the necessary skills in place that would allow me to take that and hit the ground running, really.
And what was your first project post-Celtic in terms of filmmaking, documentary making?
The first one with Purple would have been Gothenburg 83. So that was amazing. What an incredible experience that was for Aberdeen. I mean, I know we say as Celtic fans that we're so fortunate that we've had all these amazing moments, but you have to think that other clubs and other fans have got those special moments too, and to be able to celebrate them on their behalf is actually really quite amazing. And Alex Ferguson, gave us the usual, you can have 5 minutes. And then, after 55 minutes, like, his PR person's actually banging the door down, stop talking, you need to go. So I think people do really get caught up in the emotion and stuff. But yeah, Gothenburg was good. And I think that kind of established what it was I was trying to do, which was to look at football from a different point of view, not so much just about celebrating the football, but looking at the emotion, the cultural impact, just what it means to our social history, and how it influences people and how the narratives change over time. So I was on a roll there.
There's been a sort of change with sport documentaries, and there's been quite a few. You've got the ESPN 30 for 30 series. You mentioned your Gothenburg one, the Celtic TV documentaries as well, and Senna. Why do you think producers like yourself are now looking at sport through a different lens, whereas usually it was only like music that would get, where you would really get an in-depth classic album, the programme classic albums, where they would look at an album in depth? Why do you think sport is now getting looked at the same?
I think because people are now beginning to realise that it's not actually just about the sport. I mean, the sport is hugely important. Those 90 minutes when it's a football match, are everything at that moment in time, but it's everything that surrounds it. It's the cultural, it's the community, it's the interaction, it's the engagement, it's the relationships between families and friends and players, and all the emotional roller coaster that's involved in it. So I think from that point, certainly that's the aspects that I find most important. It's great that we get to celebrate these huge events in our history, but I like to do it from a people perspective. And I think that's the thing that really hits hard, because that's where you get the passion and the emotion, and the engagement from a different perspective. There's
a social aspect, there's a community aspect, and there's a political aspect. I remember watching the Tannadice 87 as well. It took me back to 1987. I remember the Dundee United run. Gothenburg 83 as well. I can't really remember the run, but I can remember watching the final, and that took me back there as well. These documentaries, we recently watched the new Kenny Dalglish one. Have you seen the new Kenny Dalglish?
I've not seen it yet. I've got it saved on my Sky Plus.
It's fantastic.
Is it good? Yeah,
it's fantastic. It's really raised the bar of, especially getting Kenny to do it.
And open up, and very emotional during it. And the Johnny Owen ones, he's done the Wales and the Nottingham Forest one as well. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Was it a bit of a relief then to start covering subjects other than your team?
Not so much a relief, but it was good to take myself out of my comfort zone, and be dealing with something that I thought I knew about, but then when you really get into the nitty-gritty about it, you only know it from that non-fan perspective. So the research was really intense, and just getting to feel it in the way that I would naturally feel a Jimmy Johnstone documentary. It's natural, it's kind of within me. I know it, I know this stuff. It's easy to track it because I've got so much experience in the history of the club, so it's a little bit different doing clubs out with that, but very rewarding at the same time.
And when did the idea to work on the Johnstone documentary, when did that enter your mind? And is it a case of you writing a proposal and then going to BBC Alba?
Yeah, so the BBC Alba have commissioning rounds where you can submit as many ideas as you want, but it's a 1-page submission. And I have to say that Jock Stein went in twice and wasn't successful. And actually, Jock Stein was finally won in a little cafe in Paisley, where I was attending the mod and having a meeting with the commissioner. And at that time, I had actually once secured a commission to make Barcelona 72. But Rangers, at that point, there was difficulties between BBC, and so there was just going to be issues with access. So I was using it as an opportunity to plug again for Jock Stein, and I think for a solid hour, I was constantly going on about the merits of Jock and telling his incredible story from, not just from a Celtic perspective, but obviously from a world perspective. This was the first guy in Britain to lift the European Cup. I went on and on and on for this hour. Eventually, no joy, left, walking down the street. I went one way, Commissioner went the other way. And then he shouted at me and said, all right, you've worn me down, you can have it. And I says, look, you're going to appreciate that response right there, because this is going to win an award. And then I walked away and I got, oh my God, please God, win an award. Unfortunately, it did. It won the RTS award. So, phew.
You were proven right. Now, one of the aspects of that documentary, which is almost like a signature piece of yourself throughout your documentaries, is the reconstructions. How enjoyable was that? Because that's a completely different element of filmmaking, isn't it?
It's great. I think it's actually fantastic for the team as a whole, because everybody really looks forward to do the drama scenes, and and it's a different way to do it. But I think it's an important aspect to try and make the story, particularly the historical aspects of the story, where you don't have decent archive or you don't have any archive. They should be three-dimensional, and it allows people to kind of sink into the story in a much deeper level. So very much enjoyed doing them, and I think it was a real privilege doing the Jimmy Johnstone film, the one that I did myself for Purple TV. That Jimmy's grandson played Jimmy, and that was just amazing. He
had great hair, didn't he?
He did, and it was just brilliant. He was such a shy boy, very different from his grandfather. But he just sunk into it wholeheartedly. I mean, he was fantastic. And how, he's only a little boy, he's 16 at the time, or it might have been just turned 17. But overwhelming having all this camera crew and, being asked to like play his grandfather and his grandmother, like sort of little romantic scenes and stuff. But he was great. So fair play to him. I mean, I think he just added that additional level that made it special.
And what about the premiere in Glasgow? What's your memories of that?
That was an amazing night. The premiere of the Jimmy Johnstone film was held at the IMAX cinema. So we had the VIP reception over in BBC, and then a piper piped everybody over, and, amazing guests, obviously, Lisbon Lions and, other Celtic personnel, and most importantly, Jimmy's family. But it's so nerve-wracking, these events, for me personally. Obviously you're making your films for an audience, but actually sitting in a room with that audience when you don't know whether they're going to like it or not, are they going to react? Oh, it's just nerve-wracking, but I have to say it was overwhelming just how well it went down and how much the family appreciated it. And that's the important thing, because, you want to treat somebody like Jimmy Johnstone's memory and legacy with respect, and worked really hard to do that, and they were just like so thankful at the end that his story came out the way it did.
One of the striking elements of that film was as you say, the family members getting interviewed, but particularly Jinky's wife.
Yes,
she's a comedian, eh?
Agnes is amazing. She's very straight down the line. She's very Scottish. She
didn't actually like going to the football. No,
she didn't bother. She didn't even bother about not seeing the European Cup final. It's just like, I think, she drew some fantastic laughs. But, at the same time, she's quite hard and, to the point. You could tell, like, how emotional she was. But, one of the important things to me in that film was the fact that Jimmy's daughters also contributed. And the remarkable thing was that no one had ever asked them to contribute anything about their father before.
That's unreal, eh?
Yeah, they'd always just asked James, because James is a boy. So because I'd never seen them in anything before, I was quite apprehensive. How am I going to talk these girls into doing this? Because it was really important to me, because I want to have a gender balance in my films regardless of who the subject is. And I thought, this is going to be really difficult to talk them into it. And they were like, oh, thank you for asking, because no one's ever wanted to hear from us before. So they were really, really appreciative of their chance to talk about their dad. And they were brilliant.
With the Jimmy documentary, the Jockstone one, and also the Lisbon Lion one last year as well, I think for a younger generation it brings these men to life, these stories to life, and it is the personal element that the 67 tribute is now fantastic, and it's a younger generation, and it's because of these documentaries that give, they're not myths, they actually paint them as real, they're real people. It tells a personal story, as you say, and that's what makes fantastic documentary making.
I think it's not so much that they're real people as well, it's the fact that they're normal people. You know, I think that's hugely key. I mean, when you think about Jimmy Johnstone, he didn't move out of Uddingston. Well, he did temporarily for going to Sheffield and America and things, but his heart was always there. You know, he always stayed with the community that he grew up with. That's the people he trusted, the people he wanted to be with. And he never, despite the fact of being one of the greatest players in the world, you know, his head stayed with him and with his community. And I think that's enormous, because if one of the criticisms of modern day football is that, you know, maybe that's not the case anymore. You know, people get paid a tremendous amount of money and maybe lose sight of who they were as people. But these were working class guys. These are guys that worked in the mines, for God's sake. You know, there they were, like, you know, then plying their trade and just being remarkably kind human beings.
And wee Bertie spoke after the film, didn't he? And had the place in uproar again.
Oh, Bertie's amazing. Like, the particular story he told, which I won't go into here, but as soon as he started it, I was like, oh, God, this is going to go on forever, and I know they ended. But he's amazing. And how much love these guys have for one another is incredible. And I think, sounds kind of a bit sick, really, but one of the things I enjoy most about talking to these people is that they wear their hearts on their sleeve. You know, they're a little bit older. They've kind of lost any sense of like having to be macho and hold it all back. And, you know, they're really honest and emotional. And, you know, talking to Bertie about Jimmy and him in tears, it was like, you know, that's incredible. When you think about Graham Souness crying in the Jockstone film, you know, I think that was a heart-stopping moment for a lot of people. You know, seeing that kind of, you know, that willingness to get past the football and, you know, what people achieved on the pitch and actually celebrate them as human beings and what they meant to them personally. And when you can get to that place, I think that's what makes a narrative really strong.
I think the following day, that was all the chat was about, probably Archie Macpherson and Graham Souness.
Yeah.
And the Souness emotion when he was being interviewed about Jockstone was some watch.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that took a lot of people by surprise. I mean, I'm sitting in the room and it really took me by surprise, I have to say, because, you know, it's not the persona he walked into the room with, it's not the persona he sat down with. But, you know, as soon as you go into record, he actually turned into this sort of really honest and open human being that, wow, you know, it showed how much Jockstone meant to everybody. And I think that's something that's important, that, you know, he wasn't just about Celtic. This is a man who crossed the divide.
As did Jinky, because one of the great contributions, of course, was the man who was there on the night, Willie Henderson. And he spoke so passionately about his pal Jimmy Johnstone, didn't he? He
did, yeah, and I think that's something that we do well to remember. Even when I was making the Jim Baxter film, you know, just the outpouring of support for him from Celtic players as well. This is, you know, people who saw past anything that was going on behind the scenes, and, you know, obviously now's not the time to get into all that, but the fact that they were able to see each other just as people and footballers and human beings, and, you know, okay, they were rivals on the pitch, but they had a common aim in life, and that was to do their best in football and you know, and just get on with life.
Jimmy and Willie Henderson done a roadshow.
They did.
I saw them at Cowie Miners Welfare one Saturday night, and it was great. And again, they brought the community together. Everybody was there. It was a fantastic night.
Yeah, there was, and also Jim Baxter and Jimmy Johnstone did a roadshow as well. I've got loads of stories that, across all these films that just couldn't make air. But one day you may find them in a book.
That would be very interesting. And you've covered other aspects of Scottish football, as well as the Celtic and Rangers stories. But your last one was very interesting, and it was the great club that had been lost to Scottish football. When did this subject spark your interest, and when did you decide, I'm going to make a documentary about Third Lanark?
Third Lanark, I think, has been a club that's always kind of been around me. I know they had gone out of existence by the time I was born, but I went to Holyrood Secondary School, which is obviously just a stone's throw from the ground. When we did PE, we had to... They turned the circumference of the stadium into a kind of cross-country assault course. So we used to get sent over there, and I would be kind of wondering, what is this place? And going to Celtic Park on a Saturday, my dad would drive down there past the stadium, and invariably he would be sort of saying, that's where the stand was, and that's where that was, and I know that my dad and my maternal grandfather would go to see Third Lanark when Celtic were playing away, because they lived in Govan Hill, and that's what you did in those days. You didn't have money to go and support your team away from home, so you would go somewhere local, and they used to go there. So it was kind of a fascination. And then I think as well, working in Celtic Museum, doing the research there, Third Lanark just kept cropping up all the time, and thinking, wow, this is really incredible. And knowing that they lost their fight for existence in '67, the year that Celtic won the European Cup, it was always this kind of crazy contradiction for me. So I always wanted to tell the story, and managed to get a commission for it. Not the first time, but I eventually kept in, and I got the commission. And it was actually only really when I started properly doing the research that I realised just how remarkable the club was. I remember when I did the first interview with Alan Mackay and Tony Connell, they were the first two that I spoke to. And from that minute on, I thought, this is an amazing story. Because I was talking to two guys who 50 years on were in tears about how destroyed they still felt by having that club taken away from them. So I knew that this was truly not a story so much about football. It was a story about loss and revenge and relationships and friendships, and all those elements coming together. The football, of course, was important because that's why you go and see the football, but all these other narratives going on behind the scenes made it, I think, one of the most powerful stories.
What really got me when I watched it was the fact that there's still supporters of this team. When I was growing up, Third Lanark were kind of like renting. There was something that you read in the history books, and I never quite got it in my mind that they only went out of existence in 1967. They always just seemed like a team. It was the 1890s, and then they just... When you read the Celtic history books, you've got all these teams like Vale Leave and clubs like that, and I always thought Third Lanark were like that. But then when you see the documentary, you go, wow, there's still people alive who played for this club, who supported this club. And that's what really struck home to me. I was like, and the ground's still there. And I must admit, I've never been in the ground. I've never been anywhere near it. I
think that's really key. I think the fact that the stadium, well, it's hard to call it a stadium now, but the ground is still there, and it is really evocative. And I think that's what makes the story more interesting. The fact that you can physically go and stand in a space where you can read in the history books, or you can hear the guys in the documentary say there was 48,000 people standing in that space, and you're looking around and you're thinking, how is that even possible that it can go from that to this? It's pretty remarkable, and I think that ground in itself, I think somebody somewhere would do well to maybe make it a special place of historical interest, because people do go. It's an arena that people find very special, particularly going to Hampden for Scotland games, if indeed they're going to be going to Hampden for Scotland games in the near future, who knows. But, it's a kind of rite of passage for a lot of people.
Sean Fallon told me it was his favourite away ground.
Really?
When he played. Cathkin Park, favourite away ground. A lot of good memories there. And, of course, some ex-Celts. Evan Williams played with Third Lanark.
Evan, yeah. Ronnie Simpson as well.
Yeah. At a young age. a young age. But
Yeah.
I mean, when you bring that up to the present day, Margot, and you've had a hugely successful run of documentaries, what's next in line for you, not just with your movie making but with your writing?
So with my writing, I am almost finished a new novel. So hopefully get that. Well, my aim is to have it finished by the end of the month while I'm still in my 40s, because I'm going to be 50 at the very end of the month. So set myself a wee goal, just get that one finished while you're still 40-something. And in terms of the documentaries, I've actually got 2 big projects coming up, but I can't actually say what they are right now because we're still kind of at negotiating contract stages, and you know, it wouldn't be the first time that I've actually won a commission and then for various reasons it hasn't come to pass. But I think people will be very, 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 very excited.
See, today's modern game. Who do you look in today's modern game and go, I'm going to make a documentary about them in 20 years' time?
That's a good question, isn't it? That is a very, very good question.
Kieran Tierney.
Well, I mean, Kieran is the kind of modern day idol, isn't he? He's the boy that's come up through the ranks. He's still very much regarded to be like a working class young lad. He still lives with his parents. He's not kind of lost any sense of still being touchable. Mm-hmm. He's still part of the community. He's not wandered off into anything that's beyond people's reach. So yeah. He is a good one. But I'd like to think about that actually.
What a documentary I would like to see made is about Paul McStay. I think there's a story about Paul McStay.
Yeah, Paul's a lovely, humble man, and for everything that he went through at Celtic, I suppose his story is sort of quite a sad one because he didn't get to the heights that he probably should have done in his career. But he's always going to be revered by Celtic as being, he's somebody that you look at and you think of, somebody like him and Tommy Burns, you think of, they are Celtic. If you look up Celtic in the dictionary, you see Tommy Burns, you see Paul McStay. That's the guys who kind of epitomise everything that we believe in, the Jimmy Johnstones, those people whose heart and soul were all about the club and the community, not just what they could achieve for themselves, but what they could achieve for everyone.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Margot. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you very much, Margot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling. From glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses fallen. It's you must go and I must bide.
A Celtic State of Mind's previous episodes can be accessed by searching iTunes, Spreaker or your pre-installed podcast player. Make sure to subscribe and you won't miss our upcoming episodes with former players, musical icons, documentary makers and Celtic supporters. You can keep up to date with us and get in touch at Paul Dykes, at A Northern Pros and at Celtic Star Pod. We also have a new website, www.thecelticstar.com, and on that website we have a host of writers giving you daily Celtic news, including Jim Craig, who gives a morning blog. We also have contributors such as myself, Kevin Graham, David Potter and Scotty Allcroft. Tune in next week, we will have another guest with a Celtic State of Mind.